Welcome to Charts Today. My name is David Linton, and today's edition for Thursday, the 7th of February, comes to you from London. And we start by looking at the dollar steadily marching up the hill here on the short term chart. The last 3 days, just really steady progression there. So, looking more and stronger on the short term. And we're seeing here the upside target some 3.5% higher, nearly activated, so any moves higher will activate that. And we're waiting for these downside targets to be deactivated with a move above where they started. So we are seeing the dollar just moving into more and more bullish territory, reflecting really the risk premium. The dollar is still always a flight to safety, and we're seeing that there. Against the euro, we're seeing weaker euro against the dollar, so that's that downside looking more and more likely as well. Japanese yen, we're seeing the dollar holding its strength here. It has been sideways the last couple of days, but looking set to break out again. So that will be interesting to see for the dollar. That's normally the yen chart is where we get a bit of a heads up. Sterling weaker against the dollar, back below the 130 mark, and against the euro still short-term bearish below the cloud, and against the Swiss franc and against the Australian dollar, the Aussie dollar actually weakening on comments from the Australian Federal Reserve that they might lower interest rates. So we've seen the Aussie dollar falling as a result against sterling. Bitcoin, little changed, still bearish in all three time frames. The S&P 500 index didn't change very much last night. The big thing is, are we going to get through to continue this recovery? Has been going for quite some time, so it'll be interesting for watch for any cracks. We'll see that show up in the 60-minute chart first. We can see through most of January we've been bullish, so any signs of bearishness that will show up in that 60-minute chart first. The Nasdaq, the same picture, and we've got good upside targets here now, 4% higher on the Nasdaq potentially. We do still have the big downside targets hanging over us as well, but for the moment, the short-term recovery is showing quite well. The Dow, much the same picture. The Russell 2000 also. The futures this morning, we're seeing the S&P future down 0.25% and the Nasdaq E-mini down 0.33%. Does suggest the US market will probably open lower, and we're seeing the FTSE 100 slightly lower, though still holding on to its short-term bullishness. Same for the 250. The DAX in Germany down 0.75%, but still holding on to its bullish chart here as well. And the CAC Quarante down 1/3%. So we're just seeing markets generally selling off. Japanese market down just under 1%. The Hang Seng is still closed for Chinese New Year, and the Shanghai Composite, so this week's a bit of a washout in a lot of Asian markets. Taking a look at the Sensex, we see here further rises, so looking more and more bullish. The S&P, the Australian index, looking stronger, the 200, and that weaker Australian dollar probably helping as well for Australian equities, but we're seeing here a rise there. Brent crude, looking at commodities, is sitting still at around $62, so little change there. WTI, much the same picture. US nat gas, lower still at $2.60. Hard to believe that we were nudging $4 just a few months ago. Gold is falling away, so we're short-term bearish. We're at 1304, so we are seeing a bit of a pullback after this run that we saw. We have had a good run over the last few months in gold, so we shouldn't be surprised to see that. Key thing is where we will find support, and will we get another thrust target to the upside. If we break above this level, we activate this big upside target, so it'll be very interesting to see if we can move higher. Silver looking a little bit more bearish as well. Stronger dollar not helping in either gold and silver. US 10-year yields looking a little bit better at 2.69%. German bonds just starting to recover on the short-term chart, so we are seeing bond prices looking better across the board. This data all coming from Thomson Reuters Icon. Remembering this is my long-term, my medium-term, my short-term view, or if you're using Metastock Zenith, the same picture. Looking at the Yahoo data, the Nasdaq last night, just looking at the percentages, Skyworks were up 11.5%, so they're starting to turn quite a big corner there. We see here a lot of the leading stocks were not the big names, so quite interesting there. If we look at the downside, We did see still Electronic Arts down a further 13%, so they've really fallen away quite heavily. Tesla were down 1.3%, Amazon were down 1%, Microsoft were down just over 1%. So we are seeing some of the bellwethers were just falling away quite heavily last night. Looking at the Aussie market, we saw quite big moves there. IDP up a massive 21%, CYBG up 17% there. So still, after very, very big falls, these are just really recoveries. Oz draw much the same picture. Looking at the downside in Oz, we had Saracen Mineral Holdings down 5%, but boy, oh boy, this chart still looks amazing. So we saw that the strong performers were over the trend were the worst performers overnight, and the weak performers were the best performers, a theme that we've seen quite a bit of. Taking a look at the Indian market, we see here the prices coming in live from Yahoo Finance. Sun Pharmaceutical Industries up 5%. Bharti Infratel up 3.4%. That's looking better short, medium term. And then taking a look at the shorter term, fewer stocks down. So Lupin Limited down 2.5%, not looking so strong there. The Japanese market we saw was mostly down, so only a handful of stocks up as well. And then in Europe, looking to the FTSE 100, we have here the FTSE 100 TUI group down a massive 15% this morning, so they're looking pretty vulnerable. WPP down in sympathy with Publicis, which we'll look at in a minute, so they're looking lower. Ocado down a further 6% after their warehouse fire, and ITV down 2.4%. On the rises, we've got Compass Group up 4%, starting to look a little bit better and breaking to new highs, which we're not seeing from many stocks. So Sergo Group, again, we're seeing holding on to its bull trend as well. Taking a look at the Euro Stock 600, we see here the best performers, ICA Group in Stockholm up 17%, sorry, up 5%, Beasley Group up 4%, and then taking a look at the downside, that TUI Group chart just looking pretty dire, and then Publicis we see here. Bad news out from them this morning is putting them down 11%, and the trend is down. So we are just seeing some pretty big fallers. Norske Hydro down 8%, DKSH down 7%. So it's not a walk in the park today for markets. We're seeing here quite a sell-off. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.